The marble floors of Harrington Tower gleamed under the morning light that filtered through the massive glass windows. People in tailored suits clicked across the lobby with their polished shoes, each step echoing ambition. The skyscraper was home to Harrington Global Enterprises, a billion-dollar corporation known for its ruthless efficiency and powerful reach. To the employees, the building was a symbol of opportunity and pressure, but for Samuel Reed, it was simply where he swept floors, emptied trash bins, and quietly existed in the background. Samuel was a janitor, the kind of man who blended into the corners of hallways, a mop his constant companion, his navy uniform his armor. Most people walked past him without a second glance, as though he were a fixture of the building rather than a human being. He had learned to live with invisibility, but he had never let it erode his sense of dignity. He worked hard, not for recognition but to support his teenage daughter, Emma, who was the brightest part of his life. Emma was deaf, born into silence, but Samuel always saw her world as full of color. He had learned sign language for her when she was a child, practicing late into the night until his hands were sore. Over the years, their conversations with gestures and expressions became richer than most words could ever hope to be. That morning seemed like any other. Samuel had his mop and cart stationed near the grand lobby when he noticed a young woman step hesitantly into the building. She had a notebook clutched to her chest, her eyes scanning the directory with a mix of anxiety and determination. People rushed past her, and when she tried to approach the receptionist at the desk, her attempts at communication faltered. She moved her hands in gestures, but the receptionist only stared in confusion, eventually offering an impatient shrug. The young woman's face fell. She scribbled something quickly in her notebook, but the receptionist shook their head dismissively. It was the kind of moment that most of the crowd ignored, their eyes fixed on their phones or schedules. But not Samuel. From across the lobby, he recognized the gestures the woman had tried to make. She was deaf. Something in her expression of the same frustration and isolation he had seen in his daughter's eyes when the world shut her out had pulled him forward before he even realized he was moving. Setting his mop aside, he walked over to her with steady steps, ignoring the subtle looks from those who thought the janitor was overstepping. The woman noticed him and straightened, a flicker of hope crossing her features. Samuel smiled warmly and raised his hands. He signed slowly and clearly, "Hello. Can I help you?" Her eyes widened in surprise, and then relief poured across her face. She nodded quickly and signed back, her hands moving with urgency. "Thank you. I'm here for an interview. I'm lost." Samuel's heart softened. He had been in this building for years. He knew its maze-like hallways and intimidating offices. He asked her name. She signed, "Claire." Then, pointing to her notebook, she showed him the name of the department she needed: corporate philanthropy. Samuel nodded, immediately knowing where to go. "Follow me," he signed. Claire's shoulders relaxed, her nervous energy fading just enough to walk with him. Together, they moved through the lobby, weaving past sharp-dressed executives and assistants. Samuel walked with purpose, keeping his gestures deliberate so she could follow. As they moved, Claire signed shyly. "You know sign language?" He smiled. "My daughter. She's deaf. I learned for her." Claire's lips curved into a smile, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "You're kind," she signed. "Not kind, just human," Samuel replied. What Samuel didn't realize was that they weren't alone in this small moment of connection. From the balcony above the lobby, behind a wall of tinted glass, Alexander Harrington, the billionaire CEO of the entire empire, had been watching. Alexander was a man who lived in the rarefied air of power. From his perch, he observed the world below like a hawk, calculating and distant. He had inherited the empire from his father and expanded it into realms others only dreamed of. People feared him as much as they respected him. Yet, for all his wealth and authority, his life often felt like a fortress, a gilded but isolating. That morning, he had come early to prepare for a board meeting, sipping espresso as he reviewed documents in his private office overlooking the lobby. That was when his eyes drifted, catching the unusual scene below. a janitor signing fluently to a visitor in distress. At first, Alexander watched with mild curiosity. But the longer he observed, the harder it became to look away. Something about the janitor's attentiveness, the way he treated the young woman with respect, stirred something Alexander couldn't quite name. He wasn't used to seeing kindness in such a raw, uncalculated form, especially not in his building where everything was transactional. He leaned closer to the glass, his mind unexpectedly arrested by the sight. Meanwhile, Samuel guided Claire to the correct elevator bank. Before she entered, she touched his arm lightly and signed, "Thank you so much. I was scared." "You made me feel safe." Samuel chuckled softly and signed back, "You'll do great. Believe in yourself." Claire's smile lingered as the elevator doors closed. Samuel returned to his cart, picking up his mop again, as though nothing unusual had happened. To him, it was simple: someone needed help, and he had given it. But for Claire, it was a moment of unexpected humanity. And for Alexander, it was a mirror reflecting something he had long forgotten. Later that afternoon, Claire's interview with the corporate philanthropy department went well. She was articulate, passionate about community programs, and unflinching when asked tough questions. But in her mind, the janitor who had taken the time to understand her set the tone for everything. His kindness had given her confidence when she needed it most. Alexander, however, couldn't shake the image from his mind. That night, as he sat in his penthouse overlooking the city skyline, he thought about the janitor. Why had he learned sign language? What kind of man took the time to reach out in a world where people barely noticed each other? For years, Alexander had been surrounded by advisors, lawyers, and executives who measured everything in profit and loss. Yet the gesture of a janitor, a man with no power, no wealth, no voice in the corporate machina, had somehow left the most lasting impression. The next morning, Alexander instructed his assistant to bring him the personnel file of the janitor in the lobby. The assistant blinked, confused, but complied. Soon enough, a folder landed on Alexander's desk. Inside was a plain record: Samuel Reed, employed for 8 years, reliable, no complaints, no recognition, just a man who showed up and did his job. But tucked into the notes was one detail: Samuel often swapped shifts or worked late to accommodate his daughter's school and medical needs. Alexander's curiosity deepened. He called in the head of building services. "Tell me about Samuel Reed," he ordered. The supervisor, caught off guard, stammered, "Reed? Oh, has a broken bar. Steady, quiet guy. Keeps to himself. Works hard. I suppose he's one of the good ones. Why do you ask?" Alexander didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back in his leather chair, the weight of his empire around him, and wondered, had he, with all his billions, ever made anyone feel as safe and seen as the janitor had made the deaf visitor feel? That question began a ripple he could not ignore.